tamche dewa tan devi jodan dembar churji dongar tan dongar ji jodan jawar churji dongar mebe dewa tamba tan mendrawar churji Nyering chadan dan charve dan nyom chenpo la nebar churji Semjian tamji dewa dan devi dewa tamba dan mendrawa churji Nyering chadan dan charve dan nyom chenpo la nebar churji Jomden de jambe yang lai chan cai lo kan ge lo zhe jim nie zhen zhe dan ding ju xiong lu dou ba yi lo zhe bo bian hang wa zi du ser. La perfection de sagesse ineffable, inconcevable et inexprimable de la nature de l'espace sans naissance, sans cessation, le domaine de la
Ineffable, unconceivable, inexpressible perfection of wisdom, not produced and not ceased, space and essence, domain of individual reflexive awareness, homage to the mother of victors from all three times, homage to the glorious perfection of wisdom. Thus have I heard, once the glorious one was residing at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha, together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the glorious one abided evenly in the samadhi of the aspects of phenomena called appearance of the profound. Also at that time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, beholding the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, observed that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. Then, by the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. How should a son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage train who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? Addressed in this way, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the venerable son of Sharadvati. Shariputra, the son of the lineage or the daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should observe in this way. They should view correctly that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. Matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter, emptiness is not other than matter, matter is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, a perception, conditioning, and consciousness are empty. Thus, Shariputra, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, not produced, not ceased, stainless, not free of stain, undiminished, unfulfilled. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no matter, no feeling, no apperception, no conditioning, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no phenomenon, no eye constituent, until no mental constituent, up to and including no mental consciousness constituent. No ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, until no aging and death, up to and including no extinction of aging and death. There is no suffering, no origin, no cessation or path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds having no obscuration, they have no fear, and passing entirely beyond falsity, they completely pass beyond sorrow. All the Buddhas who abide in the three times by relying too on the perfection of wisdom have fully awakened into the unsurpassable, true, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom is the mantra of great insight, the mantra of the unsurpassable, the mantra peering with the purest, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering. Because it does not deceive, it should be known to be true. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is stated, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, in that way, bodhisattva mahasattvas should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the glorious one arose from the samadhi and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva mahasattva. Well done, well done. Son of the lineage, it is like that. Son of the lineage, it is like that. Just as you have taught it, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced. Even the Tathagatas admire it. After the Glorious One had thus spoken, the venerable son of Sharadvati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, and all of those surrounding, and the entire world with its gods, humans, demigods, and Gandharvas, in admiration, praised the words of the Glorious One. Heyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. In the text, we reached the question and the answer, the beginning of the answer from Avalokiteshvara, right? Addressed in this way, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the venerable son of Sharadvati. That's where we left off, right? So the answer from the great Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara calls him by his name, Shariputra. Then he designates the son or daughter of the lineage. There's this phrase, son or daughter of the noble lineage. We talked about this yesterday. Ultimately, there's no difference between man or woman because the nature of mind is the same. The only difference is a difference in appearance, like an appearance which is like an appearance in a dream. Of course, in accordance with our perception, there is the designation of man and woman, son and daughter of the lineage. Most commentaries indicate that this refers to those who are committed to the bodhisattva path that have generated bodhicitta. Others say that it is just a polite way to speak to somebody in India. Honestly, I couldn't tell you which one is correct. Wasn't alive in India at that time. Son or daughter of the lineage. There's also a point that certain authors mention, which is that mentioning daughters is unusual in Indian culture, and this is specific to Buddhism that does not make a distinction. As you know, the Buddha also established a community, a monastic community of women, the bhikshunis. And this was against popular opinion in India at the time. So this is positive in terms of Buddhism, we could say. In any case, the son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should observe in this way. There are a certain number of practices in Buddhism, such as practices connected with honoring the three jewels, with offerings, or helping other sentient beings, through giving, listening to the teachings, reading the texts, studying them, explaining them, to write and comment on them, to recite these texts, to reflect on their meaning, to contemplate them, and also to cultivate their meaning. In general, we can say that in the term practice, this concerns the practice of, sometimes we talk about accumulation or acquiring merit and wisdom. Pardon me. Progressing in terms of qualities of merit and in terms of our discernment, wisdom. However, here, practice is that of the profound, perfect wisdom. That is what is concerned here. The answer also. The term profound, Gambira in Sanskrit, Sapa in Tibetan, brings up the idea of something that is difficult to grasp or ordinarily understand due to its subtlety. Perfect wisdom that penetrates or understands or sees reality as it is beyond all our confusion, profound, subtle, ultimate reality in this way. This term profound relates to emptiness. One who wishes to cultivate or practice perfect wisdom must observe in the following way, says Avalokiteshvara. They should see or observe in this way. They should view correctly that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. In the answer, the first part says, they see indeed that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. Here, the term view, they should view correctly, is a somewhat approximate translation. In the Tibetan, there's a complementary sense. Tongpar, non nampar, yongtakpar. Nampar, which concerns appearance. In this way, a mental representation of emptiness. And yongtakpar, which is translated here in terms of correctly, they should view correctly or see appearances correctly. There's something to reflect on in terms of the English. Correctly, we can also understand in terms of authentically. So according to some commentaries, we can see here that there is a mention of the practice of vipassana and also shamatha. One must first contemplate emptiness, through analysis, and have an idea or a concept, an image, a representation, correct one, of what we understand in the term emptiness. Given that today, for us, understanding always happens via a subject grasping an object of knowledge. This occurs in duality. Of course, there's a bias aspect. This is why the term appearance or image is referenced in the text. This connects with vipassana, the discursive, conceptual understanding. And then authentically refers to, or correctly, refers to non-discursive contemplation. We rely on mental calm. They should view correctly that even, chang is a term in Tibetan that is connected with this word even. In some commentaries, it is the 5 aggregates as well as all other categories of phenomena designated in Buddhism. And then other commentaries say, given that here that Avalokiteshvara is speaking to Shariputra. Shariputra is a Shravaka. He understands the meaning of the absence of existence of self. And so he says, not only the self is empty of substance, but also the 5 aggregates. In the Shravaka vehicle, it is affirmed that the self has no essential existence. Self, and even conventionally, has no reality. There is grasping. When I say I, there's this very strong grasping, but there's nothing there that we can find, just the 5 aggregates. But we may think that the 5 aggregates themselves have a substantial existence. We can reify body and mind, and then this can lead to, again, grasping at I. So not only the I has no essential being, but even when we look at the 5 aggregates, they are empty of substance. This first sentence presents or summarizes, in a way, the practice when we are talking about the 5 paths of the Bodhisattvas. The first 2 paths, the path of ordinary beings. Starting from the 3rd path, we talk about Aryas, those who have directly realized emptiness, but prior to that, there's the path of ordinary beings, Sambhara Marga and Prayoga Marga, and then the path of accumulation and the path of preparation or junction. essentially practice in terms of these two levels are summarized in this phrase. They should view correctly that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. They see through cultivating, through listening to the teaching and reflecting on the teaching, first developing a wisdom through listening, something learned, something that is acquired and then cultivated through practice in order to arrive at a more and ever more precise understanding and transformative, if I may. The union of shamatha and vipassana is essentially the basis, the foundation for practice on the path of accumulation. Then we continue to what is called Hong Ye Shiko, or the four expressions of emptiness, or the fourfold depth. Matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter, emptiness is not other than matter, matter is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, a perception, conditioning, and consciousness are empty. Here we see that in this part, we see the commentaries say that this corresponds with maybe I'll explain a bit more first, the meaning of emptiness. So we saw here in the previous sentence, are empty of substance. Rongshin Getonwa. What do we understand by emptiness? There are different ways of seeing, understanding emptiness. We can grasp it like a kind of absence. Understanding emptiness is not about finding absence or lack. It's not equivalent to non-being or non-existence. It's not about finding the absence. So in order to clarify this, certain commentaries speak about 5 types of emptiness. Emptiness of what did not exist before, the emptiness of what does not exist due to being destroyed. The third is totally non-existent, emptiness of totally non-existent. Fourth is the emptiness of something that is not found in something else. And fifth is emptiness of substance. Swabhava shunya, emptiness of substance, empty of substance. So here we're not talking about the first 4 forms of emptiness. Now we're talking about emptiness of substance. So we already mentioned what we talk about when we talk about substance. It is something that exists without depending on anything else. For example, when we think about the body, we think about a thing. Ordinarily, we grasp this thing as being, on the one hand, distinct, separate as an object, separate from our perceptions, separate from the subject. Now, to begin with, there's a gap between the object and the subject. There's this duality that manifests between subject and object, and the object is grasped as being independent, separate from the subject. The object in and of itself, whatever it is, when we grasp it, we think that it is one thing that exists in and of itself on its own. This glass, this table, this flower, all the things that we think, we grasp them as entities. In other words, for us, each thing is something that doesn't depend on anything else. The emptiness of substance is that this attribution of entity cannot be found. We cannot find it. In other words, there is nothing that exists without dependence, without depending on something else. This entity that we grasp, that we suppose, and which is the basis for our interaction with all of our perception, all of our experience, cannot be found. We do not find anything that is independent, that depends on nothing. For something to be, to exist, it must be in and of itself, on its own. And as such, not finding existence, of course, we won't find non existence. Emptiness is not finding an absence, nothingness. We also won't find something that is both existent and non existent at the same time. They are mutually exclusive. We also don't find the negation of existence and non existence. This is what we call Shalem. We reify, we constantly being in and of itself in terms of everything in our experience, but this being in and of itself cannot be found if we analyze. It's not a question of belief or a decree that we must follow. This concerns analysis. Critical thinking does not allow us to establish any entity that exists in and of itself, independent of everything else. In our perception, things seem to have being in and of themselves. We grasp at them in this way. Confusion and illusion is not the fact that there is experience, it's concerning misunderstanding. For example, in a dream, we don't see that it's a dream, and we think that everything that appears to us are things that independently appear, substantially appear in the way that they appear to us in our experience. Matter is emptiness. Zuk Tongpao. There are two terms in Tibetan, Tongpa and Tongpa that is translated here by emptiness and Tongpa empty, but the meaning is equivalent. What we call matter here, the Sanskrit term is rupa. It is the first of the 5 aggregates. If you'd like to learn more about the 5 aggregates, I invite you to read about this topic, notably the texts of the Abhidharma. There are translations of the Abhidharma Kosha and the Abhidharma Samuchaya in French and English. Also, here at Dhagpo, there are instructions on the Kejuk, a text of Mipam Rinpoche that summarizes the premise of the Abhidharmas. You can learn more about this, have instructions on this. In short, matter is what is constituted on the basis of elements, physical elements, all that is developed based on physical elements. There are also forms of matter, physical forms that are derived, that are not perceptible. These are mentioned in the text. In short, what we could ordinarily associate in the West with matter, physical reality, the physical reality of the body, the physical reality of outer phenomena. Here, in particular, the body. Here, the aggregate of matter is mentioned first, then the 4 other aggregates are mental, not physical. Feelings, a perceptions, conditioning, and consciousness. These are mentioned after because physical matter is a bit like a recipient a container, and the others are a bit like water held in a vase. If we see that physical matter is free of substance, then it is easier to see that what is already imperceptible, in other words, the other aggregates, are empty of substance. Matter is emptiness. Here, of course, it's not as though what this means is that matter does not include any being in and of itself. It is, in this sense, emptiness. This emptiness is not something that arrives at a certain moment. It is indissociable, indivisible from matter. As soon as there is matter, emptiness is present at the same time. This is why, or this is how, matter is emptiness. What do we want to say here? It means that in our appearance, there are things that appear as being matter, as having their own identity, being in and of themselves. But if we analyze, the final nature of this appearance, of this matter that appears to us, we cannot find its being in and of itself on its own. You can look at, you could refer to the various arguments that we can find in the text of the Madhyamaka, the refutations that we see in the Madhyamaka text. For example, the analysis of one and many that we mentioned. Whatever the physical body is, whether it's our personal body or an outer physical element, when we look at it, it is made up of parts. We cannot see a whole body without parts. Our physical body, there are our organs, arms and legs. Then the organs are made up of cells, and the cells are made up of atoms. We can't find anything that doesn't depend on something else. There's no element that exists on its own, in and of itself. In this sense, then we can see our confusion. We see that we grasp an entity, one. And often associated with this entity, there is an idea of permanence. We think that the thing that we grasp is the same. I saw you yesterday. When I look at you, I associate a name. You are one person, one entity. And in my impression, I'm facing the same person. The same person that you were yesterday doesn't exist anymore. It's changed. And the person that you will be tomorrow doesn't exist yet. Only the person who's present now. But where is this present person? If we look for a substance in time, a present moment that exists in and of itself, we won't find it either. We see that our grasping at a unit and at permanence doesn't correspond with reality. In terms of what we perceive. There are 4 expressions here. Matter is emptiness. Emptiness is matter. Emptiness is not other than matter. The first 2 are abridged expressions. Then there are more in-depth expressions, the 2 following ones. First of all, what appears to us as matter, as an entity in and of itself, does not have any essential being. It is empty of substance that we falsely attribute to it. Emptiness is matter. We could see this, that emptiness is the same thing as matter. It's also empty. Emptiness is not a substantial entity that is separate and beyond appearance, like a substrate of appearance. Emptiness is matter in the sense that emptiness is not the negation of matter. Because matter is emptiness, this doesn't eliminate matter. It would be as though emptiness destroys matter. Emptiness is not the negation of the conventional appearance of matter. Emptiness is also not something that is found separately, independent of matter. It depends on matter that qualifies it, because this matter, when we examine it, we do not find any being in and of itself. In one of the commentaries, it is said, matter is a term that designates, that conventionally designates matter that is perceived and conceived of by what mind, of a mind that is in confusion and that has not understood the nature of emptiness. Concerning the term emptiness, this term is used here because it is the nature of matter. Matter is without characteristics. It is not observable in the past, and it is not observable in the future and the present. The absence of characteristics, it's said, it does not have the characteristic of having a being in and of itself. It is free of the specific characteristic of having an entity in and of itself. It is not observable in the past. The past no longer exists. We can't see the past or the future. Also, the present. We cannot, in the present, find a being in and of itself. If in the present there were a being in and of itself, then there would be no change. Because as matter does not abide anywhere or in anything, the sutra says emptiness. Emptiness is matter. Means that, conventionally, what we designate with the term emptiness, that emptiness is something that cannot be observed, just like matter. Just like matter, we cannot observe its being in and of itself. We also cannot observe the being in and of itself of emptiness. In this way, emptiness is matter. But also, as emptiness is not found distinctly separate from form, we also designate that emptiness is matter. Concerning the following expression, emptiness is not other than matter, matter is not other than emptiness. This thing that is matter is inexpressible emptiness. When matter is abandoned, when matter is rejected, emptiness cannot be found. It's not by excluding matter that we will find emptiness. Emptiness is not other than what appears as matter. In this sense, it is said that emptiness is not other than matter. This thing that is inexpressible emptiness does not exist and also cannot be found apart from what we conventionally designate with the word matter. This is why matter is not other than emptiness. Maybe a point that can help us here. What's happening here is that there's a connection between conventional reality and ultimate reality. Our perception is grasping matter, an entity, a substance that would be entirely distinct or separate. Here we can see that ultimate reality, the full analysis of a phenomenon, is not a separate dimension. It's not something distinct. From the conventional, but the two are also not identical, nor are they distinct. We'll come back to this later, but this concerns two ways that we get confused. We attribute or we superimpose, Dhagpo in Tibetan, we superpose a quality that is not there, an essential being, something that exists on its own, and we attribute this. So this is the basis for our grasping, what inspires our attraction or rejection. There is this impression of something apart, and then we have a reaction to it. But this is simply an illusion. This is not understanding reality. So in that sense, we're in the conventional grasping, dualistic grasping. But in fact, reality is, this is just a projection. In reality, this doesn't exist. It's not as though there's some kind of two separate dimensions. But there's one where we're in confusion, the confusion of conventional reality, and then the other is understanding reality as itself, no longer being in a representation, recognizing this attribution. In short, where there is matter, there is emptiness, and emptiness is not something that we can find as an entity on its own, separate from matter. But they're not identical either, because they're not identical nor separate. They're two different ways of grasping. One is grasping being in confusion, and the other is not grasping this substantiality and being free from this confusion, seeing reality as it is. Emptiness is not identical to matter, but it is simply not something that is separate from matter. When we say matter is emptiness, this doesn't mean that they share, how could I say it? Qualities like form, color, size. It's just that emptiness and matter are co-appearing. They share this quality that we cannot find their substantiality. Here, between the conventional and emptiness, often emptiness, there's a kind of grasping of an absence, the absence of being in of itself, and this grasping of the absence of a being in self should not be confused with the idea of finding nothing. Another way of expressing emptiness is to designate reality like pratidya samutpada, dependent arising. What is dependent arising is emptiness, and emptiness is dependent arising. Seeing emptiness is seeing dependent arising. Understanding dependent arising is understanding emptiness. Emptiness, in this sense, as you can see, is really not a designation of nothing. It's just the absence of reification, the imagination or illusion that we continually entertain. It's already 11. Let's take a break and we'll come back and I'll give you some time for questions.
Diye tamche ziba nye toni nyebe ranam pamche ne cheka naje balap trupa sibe tsole ro war sho. O sanji chodan soji chonam la chanchu pardo dane chapso chi Yenso jibe senam chi ro lai benchir sanje ro ba sho sanje chodan soji chonam la chanchu pardo dane chapso chi dage jenso jibe senam chi ro lai benchir sanje ro ba sho Sanje chu dan su je cho nam la chan chu par do dani chap su che da ge jin su ji be su nam che ro la pen chir san ji ro bar shu sem je tam je de wa dan de ngar da dong ngar je jo da cha war chur Dongar mebe dewa tamba tam mindra war churji. Nirin cha dan tan charbe dan nyom chenpo la nebar churji. Chom den den jambe yang la chan tsai lo. Kange lo dim nye zhar nye dara nam da ram sarve. Chi nye tungun chi jin si chi ni che do kara le bam tse. Kanda si be zun rar ma ri mun tum dung ar chi sir ve. Zho zo kyun la pu ji dar zi yan la chu ju yang den su. Zhu dar chi zhu nyu mo ni long le ji jia zhu zhu zi qin. Ma ri mun si dung ar nyu gu chi ni jun zi ra zhe nam. Dene da jin sa ju tar sun yun den lu zo ger si du wu gu. Ju ra ju da ju ni jin zhe. Da lu mun sirin jian bei yang lai lu. Zai den ju jie jian ra wu ziri jie da lu de mu mun ba rab sar. Ga dan den ju shung lu dou ba ye lu zhi bo be na sar du sur.
In the text, Shariputra, the son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom, should observe in this way. They should view correctly that even the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. This first reply involves seeing the aspect. I'm not exactly sure how to translate it. There's kind of an aspect that's missing in English, that the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. This expression summarizes the practice of the Sambhara Marga and Brahmvara Yoga Marga. Then the part that we started this morning. Matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter, emptiness is not other than matter, matter is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, apperception, conditioning, and consciousness are empty. This corresponds with the path of seeing, Darashana Marga. Of course, it's just an indication, if you will. These subjects go somewhat beyond what we can cover in this teaching in such a short amount of time. Another way that we could look at this, matter is empty. Matter is empty in the sense that it is free of the duality of subject and object. And this is the finality of the nature of matter. And emptiness is matter in the sense that the appearances of matter are not eliminated by emptiness. They're not lost in emptiness. So here For example, there's a reading primarily from the perspective of the Yogacara school. Matter is indivisible from the consciousness that perceives it. So it is endowed with the quality of clear and knowing consciousness. It is not ultimately other than emptiness. In short, here, distraction, biased grasping can be, in terms of superposition, attributing a quality that is not really there. Thinking that something has something that it is free of is a kind of attribution, imagination, that derogates from or denies, thinking that there is nothing. This is also refuted in this statement: matter is emptiness. The being in and of itself that we superpose on emptiness cannot be found. The ultimate nature of emptiness is not observable. The nature of matter cannot be found in terms of one or multiple. It is empty of essence, svabhava. And emptiness is matter. In other words, we may think here that saying that matter is emptiness is the destruction of matter. We might think nothing would fall into the extreme of negation, but this is avoided by this formulation. Emptiness is matter. Emptiness is not an entity. It's not a separate nothingness. It is simply what appears to us in our confusion as matter. In short, we avoid false qualifiers and the nothingness, nothingness or a vacuum. This sets aside these possibilities, or negates, not the right word, but refutes these possibilities, shows us the falsity of these ways of looking. The formulation, matter is emptiness. Emptiness is not other than matter. Matter is not other than emptiness, eliminates this superposing kind of independent existence, substantial existence to matter. This affirmation dissipates as well the mistaken conception that emptiness is the negation of the objects of consciousness, objects of knowledge. Emptiness is matter. Matter is not other than emptiness. This dissipates the negation of the ultimate. In other words, emptiness, reality, is simply the conventional. In other words, here, saying that reality does not exist at all, that there's nothing. We could also look at we can read another passage from a commentary. matter is emptiness. Matter, this commentary says, designates earth, water, fire, wind. Emptiness is the ultimate, the Dharma Dhatu, element of reality in its ultimate sense. Due to the fact of the characteristics of emptiness, these matters are emptiness. The character of emptiness is the non-dual, in the sense that it is beyond being enumerated and a subject that enumerates. It is the state that corresponds with abandoning all grasping of me and mine. It is what is free of subject and object. This is the non-dual character of reality. It is the non-dual character of reality. Phenomena are not made up of a variety of forms of emptiness. The four basic elements, or following the presentation of matter according to the Abhidharmas, which designates earth, water, fire, and wind. Water is all that is solid in appearance, water, what is liquid, fire, what is heat, wind, lightness, and movement. It is without characteristic, without entities, without self. This does not mean that things become emptiness following our obliteration of them. They are naturally emptiness. This is how we need to understand the expression matter is emptiness. This thing that is the natural emptiness of matter is ultimate emptiness itself. Ultimate emptiness does not exist separate from the natural emptiness of matter. This is why emptiness is matter. Ultimate emptiness is itself the natural emptiness of matter. There's a passage in the Akshaya Mashinir Sutra that explains why the emptiness of matter is ultimate emptiness. Bodhisattva, quoting the sutra, which says, Bodhisattva, the Dharma Dhatu, that is the object of wisdom, that penetrates the Dharma Dhatu, are the elements earth, water, fire, and wind. However, the Dharma Dhatu is not the characteristic of solidity of earth and fluidity of water, heat of fire, and movement of air. The Dharma Dhatu of everything is similar because they are similar in all being emptiness, free from substantial reality. This is how we must understand that the emptiness of matter is ultimate emptiness. The term Dharmadhatu here, the element of reality, designates the emptiness of, in fact, that all elements of reality are free of substantiality or being in and of themselves. Now maybe let's leave some time for discussion, questions. And we'll come back to this perhaps after, and then look at the eightfold depth and the three doors to liberation. Then there's there's an overview of all category of phenomena. It's not a question on emptiness. This morning you listed the 5 paths of the Buddha, the first 2 being the ordinary path. You talked about the 5 paths of Buddha this morning. I heard you talk about that. I was very interested in that. You mentioned the first 2 paths that are the ordinary path, the path of accumulation and preparation. Okay, I understand. I was confusing the paths with the vehicles. Okay, the 5 paths. So then what are the 3 other paths? The path of seeing. Okay, so Sanskrit terms. Sambhara Marga is the first one. Suklam, which is often translated as the path of accumulation or path of getting equipped. Not in English, but you could translate it that way. So, of course, we can also talk about the paths in terms of the vehicles, the Shravaka vehicle, the Pratyekya Buddha vehicle, and the Mahayana vehicle. We're talking about the path in terms of the Bodhisattva vehicle. This begins with taking Bodhisattva vows, or more specifically, generating bodhicitta. Bodhicitta here being the relative bodhicitta. At this level, we begin by cultivating wisdom that is the fruit of listening to the teaching, wisdom that is learned in a certain way. Then we try to cultivate the wisdom that is the fruit of reflection and analysis, which is acquired. Then we try to cultivate wisdom, and in parallel, we will train in mental calm and accessing shamatha, and then the union of shamatha and vipassana, real and efficient. And here we begin the path of junction or preparation. This is the path where we have not yet actualized the perfection of wisdom. We don't have direct knowledge, authentic knowledge, direct authentic knowledge of emptiness. And this is the premise in the text. First, we begin with a representation of the ultimate, of ultimate reality, a concept of emptiness. It's something that we'll think about, that we'll understand with words, but it's necessary to have a representation that is nevertheless authentic, correct. Then this will turn into experience. This experience will still be a reflection. It's not yet perception, a direct perception of emptiness, but it's an open door in a way. And the moment when we have real realization of emptiness, direct, real, authentic, This corresponds with the path of seeing. It's called this because at this moment we directly see without images or representations. We see emptiness in the ultimate sense of the term. And this vision is then cultivated. The following path is called the Bhavana Marga, the path where we cultivate. We mentioned yesterday that a bodhisattva can enter into meditative absorption during which they observe emptiness, and then he doesn't observe phenomena at this point. And when they come out of this meditation, then there is the following phase, which we call subsequent attainment. Then there are still subtle traces of grasping, dualistic grasping. And over time, this path is divided into the 10 bodhisattva levels or grounds. And at the end of these 10 levels, we enter the path of no more learning or beyond study, which is the state of enlightenment, Akshaisha Marga. The path of no more learning, beyond training, beyond exercise. This is the accomplishment of the path, the fruit of the path. That's a general overview. The subject, the explicit subject of the literature of the perfection of wisdom is emptiness, the emptiness of all phenomena. And the implicit subject is how the perfection of wisdom is actualized. This subject is that of the realizations of the 5 paths, the 10 bodhisattva levels. This subject is a very vast subject that is developed. The first subject. So right now we're looking at the root text, but then there are commentaries that make the point of emptiness more explicit. This specifically concerns the works of Nagarjuna and his disciples, Chandrakirti and Aryadeva. And then there is the implicit meaning, the hidden meaning in terms of the Sutra of Perfection of Wisdom, which is developed by the Bodhisattva Maitreya and Asanga. In, for example, the Abhisamaya Alankara, which is a very important text that takes up a large part of the study in the Buddhist universities. Students spend 6 years studying. Hello, Rinpoche. You said to us earlier, emptiness is also empty. I find this statement very difficult to relate to. Can you develop the meaning of this term? Okay. In other words, if we look for emptiness, it's not an entity that we can find. It's not as though emptiness is something. Of course, when we talk about emptiness, we say it's emptiness, but the expression itself and our tendency is to look to grasp something that is emptiness, to think about something that is emptiness. And then we say, okay, emptiness is the absence of being in and of itself. And we have an idea, a concept. And it's easy for us to think emptiness is something. Emptiness is not something that can be found as an entity. It's just the fact that. It's the absence, in short, of what we have imagined, our illusion. Emptiness is simply this, the absence of our illusion. The absence of our illusion is not something that we can grasp. We can eliminate this mistake, but we will not find a kind of entity or thing that is emptiness. So, particularly, like what I said earlier, what we need to reflect on is the fact that we have this grasping. All of this reflection is not to have a kind of metaphysical discussion to describe something very subtle that's beyond us. It's meant for practical application. And practical application, as I said, first, when we say non-self, it's not so much about seeing that in the body we don't find the self and in the mind we don't find the self. We can carry out these analyses and despite that, still keep grasping at a self. Of course, the body has no self, mind is not the self. But as soon as you get mad or as soon as you experience great joy, you experience this solid I. That is the object of refutation. This I that's solid that I grasp. Where is it? That's what we have to surpass. The goal of practice is to appease the afflictions, to liberate ourselves from the cycle of causality. Intellectually, we can develop concepts, we can know all the words, examine the five aggregates and say, oh, there's no I in the five aggregates. But the I is still hidden. We haven't. It's just as strong. Maybe even it grows through adding this qualifier. I understand emptiness. I can explain it to others. If we see that there's no I, then we have to be able to let go of this grasping of I. When this grasping of I is there, then where is it? What is it? What am I grasping? It's just grasping. It's just an illusion. There's nothing that corresponds with it. I'm afraid of this. I'm hopeful about this. And I confuse it with feeling, with experience, with the body. Body, feeling, experience, opinions, all of this, when we look at it, we can't find anything that corresponds with what we are grasping. This is the point that is mentioned here in the text. Matter is emptiness. The five aggregates are emptiness. For example, in the sutra, the name in Sanskrit will come back to me. Akshamayati Sutra, it is said, matter is like a balloon. It looks like something big, but it's completely hollow. There's nothing inside. Feelings are like bubbles that are just momentary. They appear and disappear in a moment. A balloon, if we look at it, we don't find it's hollow, it's empty. There's nothing that corresponds with its appearance in a substantial way. Feelings are momentary, changing. There's nothing substantial to them, nothing real. Our imperceptions or conceptions are like mirages that are mistaken grasping produced by our craving. We see water in the distance, carried by our thirst. We see water. In the same way, due to our conceptions, we say, oh, this is good, this is bad. This is all influenced by our own craving. Conditioning or conditioning phenomena are like the trunk of a banana tree. The trunk of a banana tree, in fact, a banana tree doesn't have any trunk, it's just leaves. If we peel them away one by one, there'll be nothing. If we look at all the mental events, all the conditioning powers, nothing among them has any foundation or real reality. And the consciousnesses are like a dream. Like in a dream, that's just an illusion. We grasp this illusion as being real. Everything that consciousness gives us, we grasp it as being real. Nothing exists as we perceive it when we examine it. It's something constructed, something presented by our own consciousness, indivisible from our consciousness. And so, to reply to your question, we can see that all of this is illusion, but is there an emptiness that we can find? There's nothing that we can grasp. Emptiness itself is not endowed with being in and of itself. Rinpoche, over the course of what you said, I wanted to know how this reification of I functions, that it's maintained all the time. For example, when we die, the dissolution of the consciousness should also dissolve ego, and yet there's something that continues. Does this mean that ego is maintained by something else, by causality? The answer, it's just because there's no discernment, there's ignorance. Ignorance is a tendency that comes from the fact that we have not recognized reality. We haven't seen the emptiness of mind and phenomena. We're not familiarized with non-duality. In other words, the absence of being in and of itself. We shouldn't think of non-duality as an entity. It's not one. Other traditions, other spiritual traditions will talk about non-duality as well, but in that case, it's one God. It's not that. It's simply that there's no longer this grasping of myself and others. For example, non-duality is also not something that is created. It's the original reality and the natural reality of our mind. This is the idea. Last time we talked about Vasamviti. the quality of mind that knows itself, that sees itself. Mind has this quality. Mind perceives, but there is a form of perception of mind by mind that doesn't require anything else. Mind is manifest to itself in a non-dual way. This is a natural quality that we all have all the time. That is non-dual, but is not recognized or actualized. On this basis, we make distinctions. Myself, others, grasping, attributing substances. This is adventitious. In other words, it's an artifice. It's constructed, superposed on reality. Not being able to recognize the emptiness of mind and phenomena, not recognizing what is beyond this dualistic grasping. In the process of death, it is said that, of course, all our conceptions, etc., disappear, but at other moments in the day, this happens. But for most of us, it's a moment of unconsciousness. There's no recognition of the most subtle aspect of mind, free from duality. For a practitioner who has been introduced to the nature of mind, who understands emptiness, who has meditated, cultivated, then when the process of death occurs, they can at this moment abide in the natural state of mind, free from dualistic grasping, etc., because they are familiar with it, because they can recognize it. Then, at the moment of death, in this way, we can attain enlightenment and escape from rebirth. But if we have not familiarized ourselves with this, then this tendency to grasp I is still there. That's why I said earlier, all of these arguments, we have to find the target in terms of our experience and our own grasping. And even when we talk about the ultimate, it's very easy to reify. There's something in terms of nature of mind that we can reify easily, etc. But concepts are not what will liberate us. We have to practice, we have to see it in our experience. Via instructions, through practice, through meditation, then we can have a glimpse. And then on the basis of this, we can cultivate. For example, when I say to you, the path of seeing is the first moment when we truly recognize the nature of reality, when we have direct perception of reality, it doesn't mean that we have to wait and then this will just occur at a certain point. It's like looking at a field and then just saying, oh, one day there will be a harvest in this field, and then doing nothing. You have to cultivate the field in order to have a harvest. And so similarly, we have to look and see, what do we understand by the reality of phenomena? What do we understand with emptiness? This happens through listening to the teachings, reflecting, and then this reflection will lead to a glimpse in terms of our own experience that we can cultivate, that will become ever more subtle and ever more refined. Hello, Rinpoche. I'm a bit disturbed in terms of labels. We talk about labels, a big car, a little car, and then big car will be 4x4 sports. And then, but in fact, what is the car? It's tires, motor, and then we're naming something ever more precisely. We're naming rubber and then atoms. We're always putting labels on things. And I have a hard time doing anything without labels, looking at, okay, it's a car, that's it, but there's not really a car. Rinpoche says, in fact, we remove the labels little by little. We have to look at the label that we have in our mind, whatever it is. Oh, it's a big, beautiful car. We have a label. This label, then we examine, we analyze this label. First, we said, ooh, a big, beautiful car. Where is the beauty of the car to begin with? And we look. Is the beauty in the hood? Does everyone find it beautiful? We can already see that beauty is something that's entirely subjective. So it doesn't substantially exist as beauty. So then we can take away the label beauty. Now we have a big car. But where is the bigness, size of the car? It's smaller than the universe. Size is not established in and of itself. It's always in relation to something else. If I say it's a big car, it's a big car compared to another smaller car, but it is not big in and of itself. It's a label that I attribute to it, but it doesn't have that in and of itself. So I can take that one away too. Now there's just the car. And where is the car? Is it the hood? Is it the steering wheel? Is it the wheels? Is it the motor? In fact, I won't find the car independent of all of these parts. I just have an aggregate of elements. Then we can also take away the label car. And then we can carry out the same analysis for each of the elements. Okay, so then there's metal. But what is metal? It's made up of atoms. But is an atom divisible or indivisible? Some philosophies, even in Buddhism, they affirm that there is an indivisible atom that is the foundation for outer physical objects. That's the case for the Vaibhashika and Sautantrika schools. But if an atom exists, if there is an irreducible atom that we cannot make any smaller, then it means that it is an atom that has no parts. But it doesn't have any parts, then how does it aggregate with other atoms to create mass, form? If it aggregates with other atoms, then it must have sides. If it has sides, it must have a top and a bottom. It has parts. We cannot find something that is without parts, that is irreducible, that is a unit, that is singular, that is substantial. That is the foundation for physical reality. We cannot even find the components of the car. Then I could say, okay, but it's still separate from my consciousness that's outside of me. It's over there. That's what I imagine or suppose. But in reality, it's always given by my experience, my perception. It's indivisible from my experience. So in this way, we can see that car doesn't have any being in and of itself. It is emptiness. But this emptiness is not a negation of it. So here it's important to see the relationship between the fact that it can appear as a car and that this experience of a car can take place. This is due to the fact that it is emptiness, that it is insubstantial. Uh, Emptiness is also dependent arising. Reality can manifest because things arise dependently. Causal reality is efficient. It's efficient because it is based on our confusion, distraction. If we can free ourselves from this distraction and confusion, then when we can become free of the confusion that is inherent. Then we represent emptiness to ourselves as, on a certain level, the fact that all things are only wavelengths or information. Well, we can say that everything is a wavelength, but now we've reified waves. There's nothing else, appearance, blue, etc. Everything that we grasp has no reality, but we can't let go of the fact that there's waves. But the waves themselves don't have any substantiality. Waves themselves are emptiness. It's not as if waves are what make up reality. For us, what is the foundation of our reality is the fact that we experience it. In the Yogacarya school, what makes up reality is our mind. It's not waves somewhere that make it that my mind manifests all these things. It's simply a hallucination of mind, like in a dream. And the foundation of the reality of experience is that it is lived. The basis of reality is this mind. We might think, well, then there is something that is mind. And this is also reification. Mind itself is emptiness. We can't grasp its substantiality, whether it's mind or phenomena. In fact, reality is all Ramadhatu. It's all ultimate emptiness. Whatever our grasping may be, whatever the representation we come up with, it's always biased. It's always based in duality. When it is said that understanding dependent arising is understanding emptiness, is this conceptual understanding, dual understanding? We're still in duality, it seems to me. But from where I am, I have the impression that this helps me. It helps me to release a bit, to let go of this self grasping. And also, I feel that it's reassuring that I can more or less understand. So I was wondering if, am I reifying again? Am I again attributing something to emptiness? we're not leading ourselves in the wrong direction to the extent that we understand that, dependent arising, that we see that there is nothing that exists on its own, in and of itself. Everything is conditioned, co-conditioned production. We have to go back to this understanding of causality. Generally, we understand causality as an effect that is separate from a cause producing an effect. But in fact, they are mutually dependent on each other. There's no level where there's something appears independently of itself. Indeed, it is like this. Someone who understands dependent arising understands that there's nothing that we can reify substantially. Through understanding emptiness, we understand dependent arising. Understanding dependent arising correctly allows us to understand emptiness. Often, it's explained that in order to help us surpass our reification, our grasping of substance, we talk about emptiness in order to avoid us falling into nihilism, nothingness. Then we talk about dependent arising. Dependent arising is a remedy for this, in a way, to the nihilistic grasping. But both lead to the same understanding. These two words, these two ways of understanding. One has to do with looking for being in and of itself, and emptiness is the absence of being in and of itself. But this comes back to dependent arising. It is not the negation of our experience. So when we reify, then there's the emptiness of emptiness. I can't go any further. I can't understand. Emptiness attracts me, but emptiness of emptiness, it's difficult. We have to reflect on it. What do we understand of emptiness? We said matter is emptiness, but what does this really mean? Being in and of itself. It appears to us as a whole, something singular and permanent, but when I examine it, I don't see something whole, singular, permanent. It's not permanent. It's not singular because it's made out of parts, but I also can't say it's multiple because I can't reach an irreducible unit like an atom. So it's empty of essential existence. We can see that what I'm grasping is simply something imagined. It doesn't correspond with reality. And we call this emptiness. When we say emptiness, we might think, oh, I finally found it. How are we thinking about emptiness? I'm grasping an absence. Doesn't have any essential existence, but we tend to grasp at this absence. But how can absence be absent? Because we just found it. What I'm trying to say is that finding emptiness is not finding absence. It's finding the absence of our error, of our mistaken projection, this mistaken grasping that there is substance. In fact, there's nothing that is grasped, nothing that is observed. The fact that I couldn't observe anything. What I couldn't observe, is it something observable? This emptiness, in other words, it means that I couldn't observe a substance. That I couldn't, the fact that I couldn't observe a substance, is that observing something? It's not observing something. This is also inobservable. So in this way, emptiness is emptiness. Because emptiness is not something observable. It has no being in and of itself either. I think you may have answered my questioning in a certain way, but this is the relationship between mind and emptiness. We talk a lot about emptiness, but it's with our mind that we interfere in a way. So mind itself is an emptiness, but then there's mind on one side and emptiness on the other side, and so there must be a problem. On the other hand, mind isn't matter. So is there a reality that is this emptiness with phenomena that occurs through dependent arising, something spontaneous? The question that I'm asking myself is, in relation to what I've seen, in the end, all of that is our mind. What we see is our mind. It's not us because it's not personal, but I don't know, in a certain way, we also say that enlightenment is when mind recognizes itself. So when we see that what we see is only our projection, like poets say, I'm the flowers, etc. Is it, is it, is this it? Something like that? No, it's still reification. Thinking that I am the flowers, I mean, that is reification. Of course, this concerns mind, but mind is also emptiness. There's not a kind of mind. I mean, first we can look at the fact that everything is not different from mind, but mind itself, where is it? The past mind doesn't exist, future mind doesn't exist. Where is the present mind that can be grasped as a substantial unit? Its nature is the same as emptiness. It is emptiness. Every idea, every concept, every thought that I can have is always biased. In order to know the reality of mind and phenomena, we have to see how our misunderstanding works. How do we get confused? And then have a glimpse of what is beyond this misunderstanding and establish ourselves in what is beyond all misunderstanding. That's not a concept or a thought. The questioner says, so saying that mind recognizes itself is also a concept. Rinpoche says it's also it's a way of speaking, of course. Saying that mind recognizes itself almost implies a form of reality. I'm sorry, of duality. As I said, prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom, discernment, is managing to see, to recognize beyond duality, beyond grasping. The text says, observing in the way of non-observation, peering into the peerless, of the pure. this goes beyond our ordinary understanding, because for us, ordinarily, knowing is necessarily dualistic. This is why we make this distinction between consciousness and principle-based wisdom. Namshe Yese. Consciousness is a way of knowing that implies duality, grasping duality, whether it's conceptual or non-conceptual. And Yeshe is connected, we could say it's almost a kind of perception. I gave you a few indications. It's about this quality of mind that knows itself. Mind knows itself, what we translated by reflexive consciousness, that's intransitive, individual reflective awareness. That's present all the time. But it is not recognized. In other words, in short, will take away all of the veils, all of the grasping, and what remains, the most subtle level of mind, free from all agitation, free from all grasping, is the natural state of mind. We'll say this is recognizing the natural state of mind. I gave you the example of a mirror that can reflect all kinds of things. The mirror has this quality of limpidity, of clearness. We can't see it, the quality, but without it, no reflection can manifest. And this natural original quality of mind is like this. It's not something that we can grasp, that we can think of, that we can reify in any way. As soon as we think about it, we reify it, we're by it. This is why we have to analyze and dissect our grasping. There's attention or letting go in every moment. Rinpoche says, well, it's particularly in contemplative practice and meditation. Ordinarily, it's being aware or recognizing our distraction, our confusion that we grasping at itself, grasping at its substance, becoming aware of this. Then our attachment to the self, attachment to things lessens. We become aware of impermanence. All of this, if we see this, it relaxes our grasping. When we see reality, when we find that there's nothing to grasp, then there's no more grasping. We seek, in fact, relaxing, we might think that there's something to grasp, but we're not going to grasp it. No. I look for what is there. Look at what I can grasp as myself, as phenomena. But I don't find it. It's not graspable. As there's nothing for us to grasp, then grasping disappears. Because there's nothing to be grasped. So this grasping in a certain way disappears. Grasping, in fact, is what nourishes confusion because it doesn't see. So whatever it is, sounds, smells, feelings, all of our experiences, every time we reify them, oh, it exists, it is, we distinguish them. It is entirely dependent, arising, impermanent, free of essential self. there's nothing to attain. Somebody's talking without the microphone. People are giggling, but we don't know what they're talking about. Sorry, guys, no mic. But it's someone in the audience talking, so. Rinpoche says, what does fear come from? The idea that there's something to fear. There's grasping. But then where is freedom? It's true that we're so used to grasping that once we are facing the idea that there's nothing to grasp, it could be terrifying. It's said that emptiness can frighten us. We're so used to becoming attached to this or that. Grasping is self-grasping and grasping other things. But we have to appreciate freedom. The fact that everything that is artificial falls away. Everything that is illusion, misunderstanding, distraction, all of this just falls away. All the afflictions fall away, becoming falls away. And then we are free from all constructions, all imagined things. And we are just free. It's not as though it's someone or something. It's up to us to establish this. Our own mind, it's work that our own mind must do. Earlier, you talked about non-duality, and to come back to this, to try and understand it, to clarify on my own level. So there are different types of non-duality, or people could say there are different forms of duality, big, little, skinny, etc. What I wanted to talk to you about is a little bit the inner workings, this feeling that there is inner and outer, what's perceived, what perceives. Sometimes it can happen through meditation that we have an experience where there's not two. We sit in front of a wall, and before, there's the wall and there's us, and then after there's just the wall. We can have this experience without having any experience of emptiness. We're not in the non-duality that you're talking about. Okay, so first let's look at what is meant by duality. How does our experience manifest? In our experience, even if I don't think it, even if I'm not making any particular effort to think in a certain way, it manifests in terms of duality. There is consciousness that grasps something, and with this, what is grasped appears as other. There is subject and object in our consciousness. Reality is given to us in this impression of subject and object, even on a non-conceptual level. That's duality. It's rather subtle, insidious, if you will. It's always there. We're always in a kind of duality. Non-duality is first recognizing that this separation implies that somewhere or other there is substance. That's the initial bias. But we won't find it. It's emptiness, both in terms of subject and object. So we have to understand this, at least to begin, as the fruit of an analysis. Then, in terms of practice, what you describe, that you're facing a wall and you're still experiencing a wall. It's not beyond duality. Even if I'm not thinking, oh, it's a wall, I'm looking at a wall, even if I'm not thinking anything, there's still an impression, a perception, dualistic perception that's present. There's always some kind of contents that's being grasped and an experience that is grasped. In short, to go in the direction of your experience. If there's contents, but there's no grasping of I grasping at other, then you don't need to think it's emptiness. You're simply in the present moment of experience without grasping, reifying this present moment. There's also, if I may, a certain level of wisdom, of discernment, of quality of mind. If there's this experience and it approaches what we call emptiness, then not all grasping eliminated, but we're not thinking about nothing, we're not grasping, just clear and knowing mind that's calm and present. Quality of mind is in a certain way experienced by mind itself in a kind of non-duality. It's not in relation to walls or quality of experience, etc. There is no grasping. So long as there is a quality of experience, it's calm, we're grasping calm, there's this process of reification that can happen on a very subtle level. If we wanted to imagine emptiness, would the image of space be relevant? The image of space is often used. There's nothing to grasp. If we look at space, it has no center, it has no edges. If we look at the reality of mind, it's not existing, it's extant. We can't find something, it's not non-existent because there's experience. It's not both. There's not the negation of both, like space. But there is this quality of mind that is clear and knowing. So, on the most subtle level, all reifications, representations, etc., are surpassed at the most subtle level, then there is nothing that can be, there's no particular grasping of any kind. It's not as though mind grasps mind. Mind knows mind, discerns clearly, is not mistaken. If we abandon all grasping, what happens to karma? Karma only exists on the basis of grasping. Karma is eliminated, it disappears when it's something, for example, we can have when we have a glimpse of emptiness, etc., intellectually understanding, having a glimpse, but we have to meditate, we have to cultivate until there's no longer any need to meditate, until we are perfectly established in the reality of our mind. That's why there's all this progression of the path. It doesn't happen instantaneously. We're not instantaneously free. It takes time for the tendencies to dissipate. But karma is simply an illusion. It's not some kind of power outside of our mind. It's due to our distraction, to our grasping at self, grasping of phenomena. There are all the dispositions of duality that are present, and the experiences that we grasp, that we react to, every reaction reinforces the illusion. And this disposition produces births, suffering, everything that happens to us. That's what we call karma, but it's not something outside of our mind. All of these perceptions are the product or the creation of our mind, created according to our past acts, past disposition. But given that it's just an illusion, ultimately, we can become free from it. If the reality of phenomena was not emptiness, then we couldn't liberate ourselves from it. Thank you, Rinpoche. Maybe we'll conclude here for today. It's almost 1 o'clock. Keep your questions for a little later. We'll continue discussing this afternoon. I'll see you at 3 o'clock.
Sonam di tamchi zikpa ni toni ni pe ranam pamchi ni chi ga na chi palab chupa yi si be cho len zhuwa zhuwa shum.